Sorry, I interrupted that last video a little abruptly. I was had to do something real quick. Anyway, so I was talking about the idea that you have like basically 4 ways to, when you're comparing statements, you have 4 ways that you can compare them. One is to say that they are, one is logically equivalent. Logically equivalent just means that on every single line, like when you're doing the truth table, that if one's true, the other's true. If one's false, the other one's false. That the truth values match on every single line. That's basically just saying that these two are basically the same thing. The next classification is what we call contradictory. And contradictory just means that, unlike the first one where they're always the same, in this case, they're always going to be the opposite. You know, it could even be, you know, true, true, false, false. You know, I mean, it could be, you know, one's always true, one's always false. But that means they're always the exact opposite. Now, the last, the last 2 are what we call consistent and then inconsistent. Essentially what consistent and inconsistent, both of them have a standard of, basically like if the truth values don't match on every line, but it's also the case that they're not the exact opposite on every line. And so what happens is, you know, if you look and it goes, okay, these are opposite. Oh, these 2 are opposite. But in this case, they're both the same. So we know it's not logically equivalent because they're not all the same. We know they're not contradictory because they're not always the opposite. But sometimes they have the same truth value and sometimes they don't have the same truth value. And so what happens is we know that they are basically they have some sort of relationship, but we don't know when they relate or how. Well, the idea is consistent basically means they don't match, but there's at least one line on all the lines where they're both true. They can both be false somewhere. They can both be opposite somewhere. They have to be opposite somewhere, otherwise they wouldn't. But in at least one case, it's possible that depending upon the parts that they could both be true statements. That in some cases, these both are consistent in that they're true. Then you have the idea of inconsistent. Inconsistent, once again, means that they don't match. So like this case, they're different. But the only difference is that there doesn't exist a line in which they're both true. You can have a line in which they're both false. Well, you'd have to have a line in which they're both false because otherwise they'd all match or they'd all be contradictory. But so they don't match on all the lines, but on the lines where they do have the same truth value, the truth value is false. And in that regard, it's not that they're contradicting each other. It's that there's just, when they do come up with something that they share a truth value, it's false, meaning that they both can't be true at the same time. They can both be false at the same time. One can be true while the other one is false, but they both can't be true at the same time. And consistent means they can both be true at the same time. Now, you might notice this, like, for example, when you're arguing or something, somebody say, well, those statements are consistent with each other. It doesn't mean they're always the same. It doesn't mean that they agree all the time, but it means that they can both be true simultaneously. And so that's kind of an important thing, is it's saying, hey, if something's inconsistent, it's saying you can never have both those things both true at the same time. Doesn't mean they're contradictions, doesn't mean they're opposite of each other, doesn't mean that, you know, one can't be true and the other one false, or the one false and the other one true. It just means they both can't be true ever at the same time. Consistent means they can both be true at the same time. And that's all it means. And you can do that simply by doing a truth table on them.